Hi, and welcome back to this week's issue of Crosshairs, the weekly show at ThePrint, where we look at the big issues of national and regional security over the week. I'm joined today by Salahuddin Ahmed, eminent lawyer from Pakistan, who's been kind enough to come on our program before. And unusually this week with Apoorva Mandhani, our legal correspondent at ThePrint. We've had a lot of queries asking about the crisis unfolding in Pakistan. And at the core of this is the relationship between the judiciary and the executive, which isn't something I'm an expert on. So I thought I could call Apoorva on so she could actually ask our eminent guests some intelligent questions. It's an unusual thing, and I think an important one for Indians to comprehend, because for once we're not talking about terrorism or armies or police forces and spooks. We're actually looking at the relationship between institutions in a country. And trying to understand the ways in which the breakdown of this institutional relationship can deeply impact geopolitics and politics in a country. And I'll start with the first question, if I may, Salahuddin. Exceptional day today, the National Assembly passing a resolution asking the Prime Minister to ignore the Supreme Court's verdict calling for early elections. In a big sense, does this mark the complete breakdown of the relationship between the executive and the judiciary and the election commission? How is one to make sense of this quite incredible situation?
Well, to really understand this, the present situation, you have to go back a few years. You have to go back to 2017. Because there is this perception, a widely shared perception, that when the establishment, the army, was unhappy with Nawaz Sharif, they tried to get him out by using the judiciary. And you did see a period under the Chief Justice Saqib Nisar at the time, where, first of all, Nawaz Sharif was disqualified from being Prime Minister on account of non-disclosure of assets. Then he was, removed from his seat as the president of the Pakistan Muslim League. After that, he was jailed for various offenses. His daughter was jailed as well. And right before the elections, a joint investigation team was constituted against him. And even in that, the Supreme Court, rather than leave it to the investigative agencies as to which officer to appoint, the Supreme Court registrar was, recorded trying to appoint officers chosen by the Supreme Court. So there was this perception that the court was hand in glove with the military in trying to force Nawaz Sharif from power and PMLN from power and facilitate Imran Khan's, ascendancy. So that has been, kind of the framework with which people have viewed the judiciary of recent years. But what happened was that last year, of course, Imran Khan and General Bajwa, the Chief of Army Staff, had a falling out. And as soon as, that rift became apparent, then the political parties, all the other opposition parties, they tried to get together and force Imran Khan out in a vote of no confidence. After they managed to get him out, again, it went to court. The court initially started out, there was a bench constituted, and it initially started out by saying, well, he's, even if he has, because in the vote of no confidence, Imran Khan's speaker the speaker is technically neutral, but he was from the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. So the speaker refused to count the votes, although the opposition parties had more votes. And then it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that, initially they seemed inclined towards saying, well, let's just have fresh elections rather than force the prime minister from office. But eventually, when they decided to allow the vote of no confidence to go ahead, and Imran Khan was removed as prime minister. But since then, there have been a number of judgments which have been perceived by the current ruling government to have gone in Tehreek-e-Insaf's favor, in Imran Khan's favor. The first one of them was there was this presidential reference because the president is also a former member of Imran Khan's party. So the president sent a reference saying that members of parliament can't switch their votes and vote against their party leader when it comes to votes of confidence or non-confidence. So the presidential reference was about whether the votes of parliamentarians who voted against their party's line, whether their votes should be counted in a vote of no confidence or vote of confidence, because the issue was no longer just about the National Assembly, but also about the different provincial assemblies in Punjab in particular. Both the PTI and the PDM, which is the other parties, they were neck to neck. So it went to court. And although the Constitution, doesn't say that their votes will not be counted, in fact, it's quite clear. It says that if a parliamentarian casts vote against the party directions, then he will stand disqualified. But obviously, he has to vote in order for the disqualification to become applicable. But the Supreme Court held that the letter of the Constitution might say one thing, but they have to discern the underlying spirit of the Constitution and the ethos, etc. And on a deeper understanding of the Constitution, they felt it would be better and make our politics cleaner if their votes were not counted. So that basically led to the downfall of the PDM government in Punjab, and then the chief minister was appointed, Praveen Elahi, who was in alliance with the Tehreek-e-Insaf. That chief minister came in and promptly he ordered the dissolution of assemblies. That matter went again back to the Supreme Court. Because now the elections had to be held in 90 days, but the Election Commission was in no mood to hold the elections, and the governments were in no mood to hold the elections. So it went back to the court. There, the dispute now, they started off by asking, the government parties started off by asking a full court to be constituted. And the bench said that, no, we will not allow it. And they went ahead and they passed an order. And they said elections have to be held in 90 days. There was this huge dispute. It started out with a 9-member bench. Then one of the judges, there was an audio tape that surfaced where one of the members of the bench was heard talking to the chief minister, Praveen Elahi, and the government said that the judge was biased and he had been approached by PTI. Eventually, that judge and another judge decided to recuse himself. 2 other judges were removed from the bench by the Chief Justice, and eventually there was 5 judges. But while being removed, they wrote an order saying that, we are dismissing the petitions. And so that, the Chief Justice, since we are minded to dismiss the petitions, the Chief Justice may decide whether he wants us to continue or not. So the Chief Justice removed them from the bench. Then there were 5 judges left. Of those, 3 said that elections should be in 90 days. 2 of them said that since petitions regarding the same matter were pending in the Lahore High Court, therefore the High Court should decide first before the Supreme Court jumps in its suo motu jurisdiction. The matter, so now the 2 judges who wrote the dissenting judgment, they asserted that their dissenting judgment was not actually a dissenting judgment, but it was actually the majority judgment, because of the 2 earlier judges who had said that we are minded to dismiss the petition. So they said it's actually not a 3-2 decision in favor of elections, but it is a 4-3 decision in favor of sending the matter back to the Lahore High Court, waiting for the Lahore High Court to decide. So the Election Commission didn't act again. And then again, a petition was filed. In this fresh petition, again, the same 3 judges who had passed the verdict earlier, the Chief Justice constituted a bench comprising them, and the government again objected that we would like a full court to hear this matter. We do not want just these 3 judges to hear the matter. We believe that you are you favor the PTI. But in any event, a full court was not constituted. Those same 3 judges have now again passed an order, and that has led to a situation that today, in Parliament, they passed a resolution that we don't believe in the fairness of these judges and we will not implement the order. So that's the backdrop. I mean, the summary. Now, if you have some questions.
No, it sounds a little like Humpty Dumpty, sort of the judges falling one by one off the wall. Apoorva, help us make sense of this.
Yes, Salahuddin. So I know Praveen wants me to ask intelligent questions, but I think most of my questions will come from a place of curiosity as to how similar or different our judiciaries and systems are. So now, from whatever reading I've done on this, there's also a lot of criticism that the Supreme Court of Pakistan is maybe facing from the government for judicial activism. And that's something that judiciaries across the world and even in India have now and again always faced that criticism. Do you think, in your experience, and you know the law there a lot better than either of us here, the way the Supreme Court has dealt with this case, and I know there are quite a few orders here, but let's just say maybe from the time suo motu cognizance was taken, because I know that we'll be talking about the bill as well later. But do you think, in your experience and opinion, was the Supreme Court within its powers to have dealt with the issue the way it did?
See, there's right now, there are 2 separate debates going on about the judiciary in Pakistan. Now, like in India, the Pakistani constitution doesn't mention suo motu. The judges just invented this power, themselves in the 80s. Thereafter, initially it was used, for really the depressed classes, etc. You'd have bonded labor, writing a telegram, you'd have prisoners sending a note, and, the Supreme Court would take suo motu on that. But for the last 15 years or so, especially starting from the time of Chief Justice Iftikhar Chaudhry, the Supreme Court has been taking suo motu on, dozens of suo motus every year, and, they'll get into nitty-gritty of administration, policy, taxation, etc., you name it. So that has come under a lot of criticism from the government, many governments. And the other thing that has been that has caused somewhat of a cleavage in the Supreme Court itself is that Supreme Court judges have started complaining that they are excluded from cases of an important political nature. So it is quite similar to the situation you had in India, where the judges held a press conference against the Chief Justice. So you've had increasingly people writing in their judgments, dissenting judgments, and you've had judges in their retirement speeches, pointing out that the Chief Justice has been systematically excluding judges who don't share, their political views or their ideology. They've been systematically excluded from the bench, and that has caused this complete cleavage in the Supreme Court itself. Even in this particular decision, the judges who were left off the bench, they wrote notes saying that the Chief Justice cannot arbitrarily exercise his power to form benches, and so they've been there's been this. I think the Supreme Court is now divided squarely down the center. There are judges who are standing with the Chief Justice, and there are judges who are I don't know what to call them, the leader of the opposition or something like that. So, but because of that division in the Supreme Court itself, naturally the politicians have swooped in, and they are that also because it makes it a lot harder to enforce its decisions. So the politicians are also exploiting that situation.
So, Salahuddin, I mean, you have an unfortunate history with courts in Pakistan rubber stamping or being accused of rubber stamping martial law, justifying terrible excesses. Judicial activism was meant to sort this all out, right? I mean, when the judiciary turned on General Musharraf years ago, I remember the sort of tenor of reception was generally very positive. Looking back, do you think this is just a sort of jostling of the system falling into place? Or is something dangerous happening here with Prime Minister Shehbaz basically telling the courts that, look, I'm not bound by your orders?
Yeah, so when, Iftikhar Chaudhry, stood up against Pervez Musharraf, then, everybody welcomed it, civil society, lawyers, etc. Then there was a period of suo motu activism, which everybody was applauding, and they were saying finally we have an independent judiciary. But what has happened since then, I think, is that we have entered into a period of what judges have described as judicial overreach. And in fact, in the most recent dissenting judgment in this elections case, Justice Mansoor Ali Shah calls it judicial imperialism. And he says that we really have to realize the constraints and limits of our power. And there has been this sense, I mean, you've had like absurd kind of things. Like we had Chief Justice Saqib Nisar, who suddenly decided that the biggest problem of Pakistan was the lack of water. And he set up, sitting in the Supreme Court, he set up a dam fund. And, litigants would go and he would tell them that, well, you must deposit 1 crore, 2 crore rupees in the dam fund. Lawyers who wish to ingratiate themselves to the Chief Justice would announce, oh, sir, I'm giving 50 lakhs, etc. So it became really and it was like a carnival. And then all of a sudden, the Chief Justice leaves. And obviously, so suo motos are supposed to be matters of public importance involving fundamental rights. So, but what we see is that the minute that the Chief Justice retires, the Chief Justice Saqib Nisar retires, you never had a single hearing or you never heard a single word from any judge about the dam. And the dam fund, which he collected, is just lying there unutilized. And I mean, obviously, then that gives rise to the question that was it just a vanity project of the Chief Justice? And while he was Chief Justice, all his brother judges, as well as the government and all the litigants, etc., they were all involved in that. Once he's gone, it's all over. Similarly, we had like a Chief Justice recently, our last Chief Justice, Gulzar Ahmed, He's from Karachi. And he said that I have a vision that, Karachi has been destroyed. There's high-rise buildings everywhere. There's no proper civic infrastructure, etc. And he said, I have a vision. I remember Karachi in its glory days of the 60s, and I want to restore it, in its pristine condition. So then there were like suo motos, which knocking down buildings, high-rise buildings being knocked down, orders for railway tracks to be laid, different, mass transit provisions, etc. It was all being done. Every week there'd be a new order, a new hearing. But once Chief Justice Gulzar retires, since then there's not been a year and a half, there's not been a single hearing of the case. So again, it reinforces the impression that the suo moto jurisdiction is being exercised by the Supreme Court, not with some consistent policy, with some rules, but just the arbitrary whim of the Chief Justice at the time. And when you couple that with the ability of Chief Justices to select the members of the bench they sit on, then that really creates this impression of judicial imperialism.
Apoorva, you had some thoughts on this when we were discussing this before the show about this bill to curb the discretionary powers.
Yes, I was. And when Salahuddin when you were describing the whole controversy, it sounds like a bit of a Russian doll with outside there's an entire scuffle between the judiciary, sections of the judiciary at least, and the government. But inside there's also Pakistan's own master of the roster controversy like we had in India. But now there's a bill also in the picture which intends to curb the powers of the Chief Justice when it comes to suo moto cases. And like you've described, it is probably a concern there among some sections at least. Now, in India, we do have the basic structure doctrine. Now, the concerns aside, I am a little unsure of whether, if such a bill to curb judiciary's powers comes in, I'm not sure if that would stand the scrutiny of that doctrine at least. Does Pakistan have any such checks on the parliament when it comes to curbing the powers of the judiciary?
So yes, we have adopted the basic structure doctrine. Over here, we call it the essential features doctrine. The essential features of the Constitution cannot be amended. But I don't perceive the present bill as being an impingement on judicial power, because what it does is that basically what it says is that suo moto will now no longer be taken merely on the whim of the Chief Justice. It will now be taken at the instance of a committee of the Supreme Court comprising the top 3 judges, including the Chief Justice. And it says that the power to form benches also will, be vested with that same 3-member committee. Also, it gives one right of appeal. The biggest complaint about suo moto was that you'd have a Chief Justice who felt deeply about some issue. He would say, okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to hear this case. These are the 2 people I've selected to hear the case with me. You have one hearing and there's a decision and there's no right of appeal, nothing, etc. So what this bill does is it gives one right of appeal to a larger bench of the Supreme Court. So I don't see it actually as a curbing of judicial power. It is a distribution of judicial power within the Supreme Court itself. And obviously, our Constitution does not specify when the Constitution says that the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction, it can take up matters of public importance, etc. Now, it says Supreme Court. Over time, the Supreme Court has itself, said that this power is actually the Chief Justice's power. But that's clearly contrary to the, language of the Constitution itself. So, I don't think that the bill is unconstitutional. But obviously, in this time of, such strain between the Chief Justice and his fellow judges and the government on the other side. Obviously, this bill, the constitutionality of this bill will be challenged. And, then again, I'm sure the government will say, fine, if you want to strike down this bill, form a full court to strike it down. The Chief Justice is likely to say that, no, I'm going to only sit with the judges that I'm comfortable with. So it's a very unsatisfactory state of affairs.
Well, a final question, not just an unsatisfactory state of affairs, because whatever happens with the Chief Justice and his powers, there is an order asking for elections to be held in Punjab next month. The government says it's an unimplementable order. There is the Imran Khan's party are asking for elections to also be held in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We don't know what the Supreme Court is saying about this. No constitution ever really envisaged a situation where the executive, the judiciary, and in some senses the military, which is behind the scenes of the executive here, would ever be in frontal confrontation like this. What happens? Does the army eventually jump in and settle the dispute at bayonet point, or does this drag on as some unhappy?
So yes, that is a perpetual fear that we have in Pakistan, that whenever the civilians are unable to sort out issues by themselves, at the end of the day, then the military decides to act. So, the longer this, I don't think any civilian government can continue for any extended period of time without having to go for elections. That should be absolutely clear, to everybody. If you're going to be sitting in government by the, barrel of the gun, then eventually the guy who holds the gun, is going to say, why don't I just run it myself? Right. Similarly, I don't think that, government can continue to just defy Supreme Court orders. But one issue that will probably need to be settled or will be settled one way or the other pretty soon is also, the issue, the divide in the Supreme Court. It will have to be decided one way or the other, or, they'll have to come to some joint resolution, because you cannot, and we've had that once in our past, that you had parallel benches of the Supreme Court passing orders against each other. And we've already started, down that road. So that issue also needs to be resolved equally urgently. Hopefully the civilians can get together and do it themselves. Otherwise, our fear is that someone else will come and do it for them.
Salahuddin Ahmed, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us about this today. I know as someone who cares for your country, you're probably deeply worried about the way things are going. But probably knowing from my lawyer friends, you're also thinking there's going to be fun constitutional litigation ahead. And we will be there every step of the way to watch these developments. Thank you, Apoorva, for joining us today and helping especially me unpack this incredibly layered and complex theater unfolding in the courts across our border. Thank you, and
thank you for having me.
Thank you all for listening to the program, and see you all next week.